from a very beginning. Human beings are built to seek connection. It's not just emotional, it's biological. When we meet someone new, there's an almost automatic pull to open up, to reveal parts of ourselves that make us feel real and human in the eyes of others. Research even backs this up. On average, people begin sharing personal details within the first few conversations. It's not because they're careless. It's because there's a strange kind of relief in being seen, in lifting the emotional mask and feeling for a moment that someone gets you. To most, vulnerability feels like a deep exhale after holding their breath for too long. Sharing your truth lightens the emotional load. It feels liberating. But what happens when this vulnerability doesn't lead to connection, but to consequences? What if, time after time, the act of opening up only ends in betrayal, judgment, or exploitation? Many people chalk it up to the risk of being human. They accept that some people won't handle their truth well and keep trying, hoping that the next person will be different. But Sigma males, men who walk the path of the lone wolf, who observe more than they speak, and who cultivate inner strength like a discipline, come to a far different conclusion. For a Sigma, vulnerability isn't just an emotional risk. It's a calculated gamble they almost always lose. Every time they allowed someone into their inner world, shown them the scars, the fears, the raw and unpolished truth, it's backfired, not because they misjudged once or twice, but because the pattern has repeated enough times to become a hard truth. These men have seen how, when you offer someone a glimpse behind your armor, what you're really doing is handing them a loaded weapon, and more often than not, that weapon is used against you. The truth you entrusted becomes a tool for manipulation. The story you shared in confidence becomes gossip at someone else's table. And worst of all, the very depth of your authenticity becomes too much for shallow minds to handle, leading to rejection, judgment, or mockery. Sigma males don't shut down because they fear intimacy. They don't hide because they're cold or detached. They retreat into silence because they've seen repeatedly that people crave honesty until it makes them uncomfortable. That many are fascinated by your depth until they realize it can't be easily categorized or controlled. So instead of continuing to expose themselves to unnecessary harm, Sigmas do what they've always done best. They adapt. They build silence into their defense system. They sharpen their self-awareness like a blade. They understand that in a world that often rewards superficiality and punishes depth, their truth is sacred, and not everyone is worthy of it. For the Sigma male, honesty is no longer something they hand out freely. It's something they guard, offering only to those who've truly earned it. Because every act of openness, no matter how small, can become a liability in the wrong hands. And the Sigma has no interest in giving anyone the ammunition to undo them. To them, self-containment isn't loneliness, it's self-protection. Not because they don't believe in connection, but because they've learned that most people don't know what to do with the truth once they have it. And when you've been burned enough times, protecting your peace isn't cowardice, it's wisdom. 1. They realized the connection was one-sided, the illusion of mutual understanding. Every human being desires the magic of mutual connection, that spark where two people seem to instantly understand each other. It's the sensation of clicking on a deep, unspoken level. You laugh at the same moments. You value the same principles. You both show up emotionally, mentally, and physically. For most people, this is rare. But for Sigma males, it's even rarer and far more precious. Because Sigma males live largely in their own world, protected and selectively social. When they do choose to connect, it's never casual. It's intentional, deliberate, and rooted in real investment. They don't dabble in half-hearted conversations or surface-level companionships. If a Sigma lets you in, they do it all the way. They remember your likes and dislikes. They notice your moods before you say a word. They prioritize your problems as if they were their own. When you call, they show up. When you speak, they listen. And when you win, they celebrate as if they've won too. This depth isn't offered to just anyone, which is precisely why it stings so deeply when it isn't returned. The brutal awakening. Eventually, every Sigma male who's experienced this depth of commitment comes to a moment that shifts everything, the moment when they are the ones in need. Maybe they're emotionally drained, facing a personal loss, or just need support for once instead of offering it. And that's when the truth reveals itself. The connection they thought was mutual only ever flowed in one direction. The signs are subtle but undeniable. Suddenly, the person who always had time when they needed something is too busy when the Sigma reaches out. Their advice, once sought after, is now replaced with lukewarm cliches or distracted nods. When the Sigma shares something meaningful, a triumph, a discovery, a moment of pride, the response is indifferent, barely above silence. It becomes clear. While the Sigma was giving energy, thought, and loyalty, the other person was simply receiving, consuming, and contributing nothing meaningful in return. The betrayal of self. But what hurts the most isn't even the imbalance. It's the betrayal of self. Sigma males are not naive. They are careful, calculated, and discerning. So when they misjudge someone, when they choose to open up and that trust is mishandled, the pain runs deeper than mere disappointment. It shakes their self-trust. They feel like they ignore their own instincts, bypass their usual walls, and hand it over something sacred, only to realize they were never seen as an equal, just a convenience. In hindsight, it becomes painfully obvious they weren't building a two-way relationship. They were providing a service, emotional support, unpaid therapy, stability, and they never signed up for any of it. The Sigma male realizes he wasn't in a partnership. He was an emotional crutch for someone who had no intention of carrying him when the roles were reversed. And from that point on, the Sigma doesn't just walk away. He reinforces the walls, recalibrates his filters, and doubles down on the principle that access to his inner world is a privilege, not a right. 2, their trust feels like a mistake, not a gift. The rush of being chosen. There's a quiet intensity in the moment someone realizes they've been trusted with something deeply personal. A confession, a fear, a secret no one else has heard. You can almost see the transformation in real time. The way their eyes widen, the way they sit up straighter, the way their whole energy shifts. For just a moment, they feel special. Chosen. Notice in a way that breaks through the noise of everyday superficial interaction. And in that sacred moment, most people should recognize the weight of what they've been given. They should realize, this isn't just a story. This is a piece of someone's inner world. I need to protect it. That's what should happen. The modern reality, secrets as currency. But the modern world has twisted the meaning of vulnerability. In an age where attention is traded like gold and private lives are public currency, trust isn't always treated as a gift. It's seen as leverage. For many, personal stories are no longer intimate. They're informational assets. People collect secrets the way children collect trading cards, with pride, purpose, and a subtle hunger for power. And when someone opens up to them, it's not viewed as a moment of sacred connection, but as a valuable tool to store away just in case. They remember your confessions, your insecurities, your rawest truths, not out of empathy, but utility. Because one day, they might need to shift the balance in an argument, or spice up a conversation, or simply remind you that they know more about you than you like. The Sigma's instant regret. Most people only come to this realization after the damage is done, after months or even years of misplaced trust. But Sigma males, they sense it almost immediately. The moment after they open up, a quiet heaviness settles in their chest. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. It's the sharp intuition that's been honed through every previous betrayal. They see the signs, the micro shifts in expression, the glint of curiosity that looks too calculating, the way their words are being stored rather than absorbed. And in that moment, the Sigma knows this wasn't a mutual exchange. It was a transaction, and their emotional truth is already being filed away like potential ammunition. How it eventually plays out. Sometimes it happens weeks later. A disagreement turns heated, and suddenly their vulnerability is weaponized, thrown back at them with a cruel twist. Or maybe it's more subtle. Their secret becomes dinner conversation for someone else, cleverly disguised as concern or just sharing. Or worse, their truth is turned into entertainment, fodder for gossip masked as casual storytelling. The worst part? The Sigma realizes they knew better. The red flags were there, waving quietly the whole time. This person gossiped freely about others, held on to embarrassing stories like trophies, and always seemed more energized by drama than by depth. But the Sigma, against their better judgment, chose to trust anyway. And now, that decision feels less like an act of connection and more like an unforced error, because their trust wasn't treated as a sacred offering. It was seen as an advantage to be held, a tool to be used, a moment of honesty to be twisted later. For the Sigma male, this isn't just disappointing, it's infuriating, because their trust is rare, deliberate, and deeply personal. When they offer it, it's because they believe they've found someone who truly deserves it. And when that trust is mishandled, it doesn't just alter how they see that person. It reinforces why they built their emotional walls in the first place. From that point on, every future opportunity to open up becomes even harder, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because once you've handed someone a weapon disguised as trust, the memory never fully fades. 3. People confuse kindness with weakness. The Sigma's brand of kindness. For Sigma males, kindness is a mask for fear or a tactic to win people over. It's a conscious decision rooted in values. They are naturally reserved, analytical, and discerning, which means when they extend kindness to someone, it isn't accidental or automatic. It's earned. They help not because they crave validation, applause, or a seat at the table, but because it reflects the internal code they live by. Their kindness is never desperate. It's never about appeasement or fear of confrontation. Rather, it is a form of silent integrity, a quiet strength expressed in thoughtful action. They offer support when it's needed. They listen without interrupting, and they show up for others without expecting anything in return. But this strength and softness, this deliberate warmth, is often misread by those who can't fathom the depth behind it. The misunderstanding. Unfortunately, the modern world has grown cynical. Too many people associate kindness with weakness. They assume that if someone doesn't bark, they must not bite. And so, when a Sigma male repeatedly responds with patience, empathy, and understanding, some interpret this as submission, as an inability to push back or take a stand. It starts small. People begin testing boundaries, often unconsciously. They ask for favors that go beyond reason. They expect constant leniency, special treatment, or emotional labor that they wouldn't dare request from others. They begin to see the Sigma not as an equal, but as someone they can lean on indefinitely, without ever reciprocating the weight. What was once mutual respect slowly corrodes into subtle entitlement. The Sigma's grace is no longer appreciated. It's expected. The Sigma's painful choice. This is where the emotional dilemma begins. The Sigma male, now faced with an uncomfortable truth, must choose between two equally painful outcomes. On one hand, they can reclaim their boundaries and assert themselves, but doing so risks breaking the fragile dynamic they've created with the other person. The illusion of harmony may shatter, and they may be painted as cold, harsh, or suddenly difficult, even though they were simply correcting an imbalance that should never have existed. On the other hand, they could stay silent, keep giving, keep smiling, keep helping, but deep down, they know they're being used, that their silence is being mistaken for consent. And with each unspoken frustration, they lose a piece of their self-respect. They begin to resent not just the other person, but themselves for allowing it to continue. The aftermath. No matter which path the Sigma chooses, the cost is real. If they stand up for themselves, they're often met with surprise, resistance, or guilt tripping, because people who take advantage of kindness rarely react well when it's cut off. And if they remain silent, the internal damage accumulates. The frustration, the emotional exhaustion, the slow erosion of trust, it all festers beneath the surface. Eventually, they begin to regret having ever shown that side of themselves, not because they believed kindness was wrong, but because they entrusted it to someone who didn't understand what it truly meant. And that stings the most. For someone as deliberate as a Sigma, to realize their good intentions were twisted into an invitation for exploitation. It's a betrayal that cuts deep. So they retreat, harden, and next time, they hesitate before helping. They wait longer before opening up. They guard that soft center even more fiercely, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Because when people confuse your grace for weakness, you're forced to become more careful about who sees your light. 4. Vulnerability opens a door to disappointment. The double-edged sword of vulnerability. Vulnerability, in theory, is beautiful. It's the foundation of authentic relationships. the bridge between isolation and connection. As psychologist Brené Brown so powerfully articulated, it is the birthplace of courage, creativity, and deep personal growth. But what she also discovered, and what Sigma males know all too well, is that vulnerability isn't inherently healing. It becomes dangerous, damaging even when placed in the wrong hands. Sharing one's inner world isn't just about bravery. It's about discernment. Who you choose to open up to can either elevate your human experience or leave emotional scars that take years to mend. The Sigma's calculated risk. For Sigma males, men who walk the path of intentional solitude, who value autonomy, self-mastery, and quiet resilience, vulnerability is never casual. They don't spill secrets at dinner parties or trauma dump on new acquaintances. When a Sigma male opens up, it is a product of quiet calculation and long-term observation. It's a gesture of immense trust. He's been watching, listening, analyzing, and slowly concluding this person might be safe. So when he chooses to reveal his real fears, speak about his past regrets, or expose the uncertainty that lives beneath his usually composed exterior, it is not an impulsive act. It's strategic, measured. He has decided, often after months of guarded interaction, that this individual has emotional intelligence, maturity, and depth to receive what he's about to share, the crushing reality. But all too often, this gamble backfires. Instead of receiving his truth with care, the other person reacts in one of several disappointing ways. Some become visibly uncomfortable, as if watching someone strong reveal weakness is too unsettling. Others, rather than appreciating the honesty, respond with subtle pity, as if the Sigma has suddenly become smaller in their eyes. A few even begin to question his emotional stability or judgment, simply because he allowed them a glimpse of the chaos behind the control. And then there are those who leap into problem-solving mode, offering solutions that were never asked for, assuming that vulnerability is a cry for help when it was merely a request for understanding. Each of these reactions chips away at the Sigma's trust, not just in the person, but in the process of vulnerability itself. The confirmed fear. This entire sequence does something far more insidious than merely hurt his feelings. It validates his worst fear. People don't want the truth. They want the illusion, the mysterious, self-contained, unreadable version of himself. That's what earned their interest, respect, even admiration. But the moment he lifted the curtain and allowed them to see his humanity, their perception changed. He didn't become more relatable. He became less powerful, less respected, less desirable. What was supposed to bring closeness ends up creating distance. Instead of feeling more connected, the Sigma feels more exposed, misunderstood, and alone. He realizes that in trying to strengthen a bond, he may have unintentionally weakened it. And so he retreats, quietly, not with anger, but with resolution. He learns that vulnerability isn't for everyone, that not every person deserves access to the unfiltered version of him. And from then on, he becomes even more selective. His guard, once cautiously lowered, rises again. Not because he lacks courage, but because he now understands a truth few ever admit. For men like him, vulnerability is less about healing and more about risk, and not everyone is worth the cost. 5. They miss who they were before letting someone in. For a Sigma male, solitude is not a punishment. It's clarity. Before letting anyone into their private world, they live with a strong and unshakable sense of self. They possess a rare internal alignment, guided by their own values rather than external influences. Their decisions stem from logic and introspection, not emotional obligation or social pressure. In this state, their mind is sharp, their goals are clear, and their peace is self-generated. They trust themselves fully, moving through life with quiet confidence and without needing validation from anyone. But something begins to shift the moment they choose to open the door to someone else. And it doesn't happen in one sweeping event. It's subtle like erosion. One thoughtful compromise here, one delayed decision there. Suddenly, they find themselves factoring in another person's emotions, even when they shouldn't have to. They begin adjusting their path, not because they're being manipulated, but because they care. And caring, while human, introduces complexity into the Sigma's one straightforward existence. They notice that their internal world, once a fortress of clarity, is now slightly less quiet. Their thoughts are occasionally interrupted by concerns that never used to exist. How will this affect them? Will they be okay with this choice? Should I hold back this goal for now? It's not an all-consuming transformation, but it's enough to feel different. Their mental space, once devoted entirely to growth, self-reflection, and forward motion, is now partially occupied by someone else's feelings, needs, and problems. Even when they don't ask for it, the Sigma feels the weight of emotional proximity. This creates an internal conflict that many can't see from the outside. On one hand, they appreciate having someone meaningful in their life, a rare bond that might be worth the adjustment. But on the other hand, there's a quiet ache, a nostalgia for the simplicity they once had. They remember what it was like when their choices weren't slowed down by emotional calculus, when their focus was razor sharp and completely their own, when they didn't have to balance empathy with autonomy. And in moments of solitude, they ask themselves the question that haunts many fiercely independent people. Is it possible to love someone deeply without losing fragments of who I used to be? This question doesn't always have a clean answer, but it's one the Sigma male keeps returning to, because for them, preserving their identity isn't optional. It's survival. 6. Their loyalty isn't matched, just used. Close relationships don't come easily to Sigma males, and they aren't supposed to. Research shows that the human brain can only sustain around 5 truly close bonds at any given time. For Sigmas, who operate with intention and emotional precision, allowing someone into that sacred inner circle is no casual gesture. It's a carefully measured decision. Their loyalty isn't performative, it's transformative. When a Sigma male commits to someone, he does so fully. That loyalty manifests not just in words, but in actions, passing on opportunities that might compete with the other person's success, showing up even when it's inconvenient, protecting their name when they aren't in the room, and shielding them from slander, even when it means confrontation. For the Sigma, loyalty isn't just a concept, it's a code. But over time, reality often delivers a brutal reckoning. When the Sigma finally finds themselves in need of that same unwavering support, they're confronted with an uncomfortable truth. The person they invested in doesn't operate with the same depth of loyalty. The support they receive is conditional. Help is offered, but only if it's convenient. Encouragement comes, but without cost. Defense is given, but only when it's safe. The Sigma, who have been acting as a fortress of support, sacrificing comfort, offering presence, guarding reputations, realizes they weren't in a relationship of equals. They were a one-man safety net, a quiet emotional bank account others withdrew from freely. They see it clearly now. While they were protecting someone else's dreams, that person was simply using them as an emotional backup plan. When things were good, they disappeared. When things fell apart, they called the Sigma. Whether it was a bold career leap gone wrong, a relationship failure, or another self-inflicted crisis, the Sigma was expected to be the reliable fallback. And every time they showed up, it wasn't received with gratitude, but with entitlement. This is the painful truth that changes everything. What the Sigma believed was mutual growth, mutual loyalty, mutual effort, was actually one-sided devotion. They weren't building something together. They were being used as a resource. Conclusion: the Sigma's guarded wisdom. This is why Sigma males pull back, not because they're emotionally cold or distant, but because they've learned, often through trial and heartbreak, that most people are not equipped to handle true vulnerability or loyalty with the same seriousness. Every time they've trusted too quickly, given too much, or shown too deeply, they've been reminded of hard truths. Real connections are rare. Trust is frequently exploited. Kindness is too often mistaken for submission, and even loyalty, their most sacred offering, can be drained without reciprocation. So they evolve. They become more selective, not bitter. They draw firmer boundaries, not walls. They still believe in meaningful connection, but they no longer hand themselves over blindly. They speak less, observe more, and measure people not by their charm, but by their consistency. Because in the Sigma's world, not everyone earns a right to see their full self. And that's not pessimism, it's wisdom forged through fire. Do you resonate with the ideas I shared in this video? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in more content about Sigma males, explore the other videos on this channel. Thanks for watching.